The air in the downtown branch of Pinnacle Bank buzzed with the usual chatter of tellers, the shuffle of paperwork, and the faint hum of computers. Customers came and went, their lives briefly intersecting with the bank's polished efficiency. However, today was not like any other day. A single transaction, seemingly routine, would unravel systemic flaws and force everyone involved to face hard truths. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of Pinnacle Bank's downtown branch, casting its warm light over polished marble floors and high ceilings adorned with intricate moldings. It was a typical weekday morning, and the bank bustled with activity. Customers waited in line, flipping through their phones or tapping their feet impatiently, while tellers worked efficiently to process transactions. A quiet hum filled the air, underscored by the occasional beeping of cash counters and the muted buzz of conversations. In his office at the back of the branch, Daniel Porter, the branch manager, sat reviewing the previous day's transaction reports. A man in his early 50s, Daniel wore his years of banking experience as a badge of honor. His neatly combed salt and pepper hair and impeccable suit spoke of someone who prided himself on order and professionalism. His colleagues admired his dedication, but beneath his calm exterior lay a rigid, almost old-fashioned approach to his role. To Daniel, the bank was more than a workplace, it was a domain where he maintained control. His years of experience had taught him to rely on instinct as much as policy. Though his instincts were often shaped by unconscious biases he refused to acknowledge. He believed his caution protected the bank from risk, but in reality, it sometimes placed unnecessary barriers in the way of customers who didn't fit his narrow expectations. As Daniel worked, the bank's heavy glass doors swung open, and Vanessa Collins entered. Heads turned as she walked in, her commanding presence impossible to ignore. Dressed in a tailored navy suit and carrying a sleek leather briefcase, Vanessa looked every bit the accomplished professional she was. Her strides were purposeful, her posture straight, and her gaze steady. Vanessa was a woman accustomed to commanding rooms and handling business at the highest levels. As the founder and CEO of a successful logistics company, she had spent years breaking barriers and proving doubters wrong. But despite her achievements, Vanessa knew that assumptions about her often preceded her. Today would be no different. Walking to the counter, Vanessa offered the teller, Emma Rivera, a warm yet firm smile. "Good morning," she said. "I'd like to deposit this check into my account." Emma greeted Vanessa with the same professionalism she showed every customer. But when she glanced at the check, her heart skipped a beat. The amount was staggering, well into the seven figures. As a seasoned teller, Emma had processed many large transactions. But sums like this were rare. Protocol dictated that any transaction over a certain threshold required managerial approval. "Of course," Emma said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "If you could wait just a moment. I'll have the manager review this." Vanessa nodded, unfazed. She had been through this process before and expected nothing less. Still, as Emma walked away, Vanessa couldn't help but notice the curious glances and whispers of the other customers in the room. It was subtle but unmistakable, a shift in the atmosphere that made her feel like she was under a microscope. Emma knocked softly on Daniel's office door, her nerves slightly frayed. When Daniel looked up from his desk, she hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. "Mr. Porter," she began, holding the check out to him. "I have a customer with a very large deposit. It requires your approval." Daniel reached for the check, his brow furrowing as he read the amount. "How large are we talking?" he asked, though the number was clear on the paper in front of him. Emma relayed the figure, and Daniel's expression shifted from curiosity to something more guarded. He set the check down on his desk and leaned back in his chair. "Who is this customer?" he asked, his tone slow and deliberate. "Her name is Vanessa Collins," Emma replied. Daniel nodded, his mind already working. "I'll handle this," he said, rising from his chair. Adjusting his suit jacket, he walked to the counter, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. As he approached Vanessa, Daniel's sharp gaze took in every detail of her appearance. She was composed, confident, and undeniably professional, yet something about her didn't fit into his preconceived notions of a client carrying a check of this size. He couldn't explain it, but doubt crept into his mind. "Good morning," Daniel said, offering a polite but firm smile. "I'm Daniel Porter, the branch manager." Could you please step into my office so we can discuss your transaction? Vanessa met his gaze evenly, her calm demeanor unshaken. Of course, she replied, picking up her briefcase and following him. Once inside the office, Daniel gestured for Vanessa to take a seat before sitting behind his desk. He picked up the check and examined it closely, flipping it over as if searching for an inconsistency. After a moment, he looked up. This is quite an amount, he said slowly. I'll need to verify the source of these funds before we can process it. Vanessa's voice was calm but firm. All necessary documentation has been provided. If you have further questions, my attorney's contact information is included. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. Even so, he replied, transactions of this size require additional scrutiny. It's not personal, it's just our policy. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, her sharp eyes meeting his. Policy or assumptions? She asked pointedly. It seems this process is taking longer than necessary. Daniel's expression hardened. I'll need more time to review this. You're welcome to wait, or you can return later once I've completed my checks. Vanessa sat back, her posture relaxed but her tone decisive. If you're unable to process this now, I'll escalate this matter directly to the bank's leadership. Her words hung in the air, cutting through Daniel's confidence. Before he could respond, Vanessa took out her phone and began dialing her attorney. Vanessa's call set off a chain reaction that reached the bank's regional director, Rebecca Adams. Within minutes, known for her strict adherence to fairness and accountability, Rebecca wasted no time. She arrived at the branch swiftly, her presence commanding respect. Rebecca's entrance into Daniel's office was sharp and direct. What's going on here? She asked, her piercing gaze moving from Daniel to Vanessa. Daniel stammered out an explanation, framing his actions as routine due diligence. Rebecca, however, was unimpressed. She picked up the check, glanced at it briefly, and then turned to Daniel. Do you know who Ms. Collins is? Rebecca asked, her voice steady but edged with steel. When Daniel shook his head, Rebecca's expression hardened. Ms. Collins is the largest shareholder of this bank. Her authority here exceeds even mine. Your actions today have not only disrespected her but have jeopardized the reputation of this branch. Daniel's face turned pale. He tried to defend himself, but Rebecca cut him off. This isn't about procedure. This is about your assumptions, and they have no place in this institution. Rebecca's sharp reprimand marked the beginning of a broader inquiry. Once Vanessa's transaction was processed and she left the branch with Rebecca's assurances, the regional director turned her attention back to Daniel and the practices at Pinnacle Bank. Rebecca summoned all department heads to the branch's conference room later that day. Standing at the head of the table, she addressed the assembled team with a calm but commanding presence. Today's incident was not an isolated mistake, Rebecca began. It's part of a larger issue, one that reflects on all of us. We will be conducting a thorough investigation to identify any patterns of bias or unfair treatment in this branch and beyond. She then turned to Daniel, who sat stiffly in his chair, avoiding her gaze. Mr. Porter, your actions today have brought this to light, but you are not the sole focus of this investigation. We will be reviewing all significant transactions handled by this branch over the past year. Rebecca's words sent ripples of unease through the room. Employees exchanged nervous glances, but none dared to speak. The investigation revealed a pattern that shocked even Rebecca. Over the past year, Daniel had routinely delayed or denied transactions for minority customers, citing additional verification as the reason. Meanwhile, similar transactions from wealthier, white clients had been processed promptly with little scrutiny. The discovery painted a troubling picture of systemic bias within the branch. Rebecca extended the investigation to other branches under her jurisdiction, determined to root out similar issues. She also spoke privately with employees like Emma Rivera, the teller who had initially handled Vanessa's check. Emma, though nervous, shared her observations candidly. I've noticed that certain customers face more obstacles than others, Emma said. It's not written policy, but it's something you pick up on. Rebecca thanked Emma for her honesty and assured her that her comments would remain confidential. Your courage in speaking up is exactly what we need to fix this, Rebecca said. After weeks of inquiry, Rebecca gathered her findings and presented them to the bank's senior leadership. The evidence was damning, and the board agreed that immediate action was necessary. Rebecca called Daniel into her office. Sitting across from him, she laid out the results of the investigation. "Mr. Porter," she began, her tone measured but firm, "your decisions have consistently reflected bias and have damaged the reputation of this bank. Effective immediately. You are relieved of your position." Daniel opened his mouth to protest but stopped when Rebecca raised a hand. "This isn't about one mistake," she said. "This is about a pattern of behavior that cannot continue. You will have the opportunity to participate in bias training if you choose. But your time as a branch manager is over." With Daniel removed and the investigation completed, Rebecca and Vanessa worked together to implement sweeping reforms. They knew that addressing the branch's issues required more than personnel changes. It demanded a cultural shift. The first step was mandatory training for all employees. Every staff member, from tellers to senior management, attended workshops designed to uncover and address unconscious bias. Vanessa, as the largest shareholder, took a hands-on role in these sessions. Standing before a room of employees, Vanessa shared her perspective. "Bias isn't always intentional," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But that doesn't mean it's harmless. We all carry assumptions that shape our decisions. And it's our responsibility to recognize and challenge them." The training included real-world scenarios, group discussions, and role-playing exercises. Employees were asked to reflect on their own biases and consider how they might affect their interactions with customers. Rebecca also spearheaded the creation of standardized protocols for high-value transactions. These new guidelines removed room for subjective judgment, ensuring that every transaction was handled consistently based on documented procedures. To oversee the implementation of these changes, Rebecca established an independent compliance team. This group monitored transactions across all branches, flagging any discrepancies and ensuring adherence to the new protocols. Recognizing the importance of transparency, Rebecca and Vanessa introduced a secure feedback system. Customers and employees could now report instances of bias or unfair treatment anonymously. This platform became a cornerstone of the bank's commitment to accountability. Each report was reviewed by an independent team, and swift action was taken to address any valid concerns. Amid these changes, Rebecca took a moment to recognize Emma Rivera for her professionalism during the incident with Vanessa. Calling Emma into her office, Rebecca commended her courage. "Your actions that day were a bright spot in a difficult situation," Rebecca said. "You exemplify the values we want to uphold." Rebecca offered Emma a promotion to a leadership role within the branch. Emma, though initially surprised, accepted the opportunity with gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "I'll do my best to make a difference." Within months, the reforms began to bear fruit. Customer satisfaction ratings soared, and complaints about unfair treatment plummeted. Employees reported feeling more empowered to challenge biases and uphold the bank's commitment to fairness. Vanessa and Rebecca monitored these changes closely, refining the policies as needed. They also shared their success story with other financial institutions, encouraging them to adopt similar reforms. 1 year after the incident, Vanessa stood on a stage at a national conference on equity and accountability in the financial sector. Addressing a room filled with industry leaders, she recounted her experience and the changes it had sparked. "Change isn't easy," Vanessa said, "but it's necessary. By confronting bias head-on and committing to fairness, we can create institutions that truly serve everyone." Her speech was met with a standing ovation. As Vanessa left the stage, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not just for herself, but for the countless people whose lives would be impacted by the changes she had helped bring about. Vanessa's experience at Pinnacle Bank became a case study in the power of accountability. Invited to speak at a national finance conference, she shared her story with a captivated audience. "This is not just about one incident," Vanessa said. "It's about creating systems that ensure fairness for everyone, regardless of their background. Change begins with recognizing our flaws and committing to do better." Her words inspired other financial institutions to reevaluate their practices, proving that one voice can spark industry-wide transformation. Vanessa's journey left an indelible mark on Pinnacle Bank. The institution, once marred by outdated practices, emerged as a leader in fairness and accountability. Employees like Emma thrived, becoming symbols of the bank's new direction. As Vanessa stood outside the bank's headquarters 1 year later, she reflected on the power of speaking up. It only takes one moment to start a movement, she thought, watching the building's logo gleam in the sunlight. Her story reminds us that even the smallest actions can lead to monumental change. How would you have handled the situation if you were in Vanessa's place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories on Motivation Wow.